Before we start, I would like to share that the workshop is being live streamed on STPI social media platforms. The Zoom link, registration link via QR code has been shared on the banner as well, so please feel free to disseminate it. So the first session of this workshop is based on the morning plenary, where the government representatives, partner organizations, and development partners will be sharing their perspectives around NDCs. As we all know that Pakistan stands at the crossroads of climate crisis, and to fulfill our commitments as per the Paris Agreement that we have ratified and signed, we need to submit the nationally determined contributions. We did submit the INDCs in 2016, then we revised it in the form of NDCs and submitted it in 2021. And after that, the NDCs 3.0 needs to be submitted by next year. So as per the mandated organization for submitting NDCs is the Ministry of Climate Change, and they have mandated Global Change Impact Studies Center for this very important work. We are really glad and we are honored to have been partnered for this initiative by the GCISC, Global Change Impact Studies Center. Thank you, Arif Saab. We would like to acknowledge the partnership of Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition for this workshop. So the purpose of the workshop is not just to have discussion around NDCs, but throughout the day, this has been divided into different sessions. So this is the high-level morning plenary. As I mentioned, where partners will be sharing their narratives, followed by a session with provincial government representatives and a session with CSOs and academia. After that, in the evening, we will be doing working group activity where we will be sharing the perspectives. We will also have media representatives who will engage on how the NDC 3.0 as per their perspective should look like for Pakistan. And this will help us in contributing a working paper that we will be submitting to GCISC by involving the suggestions, recommendations, and the key priority areas that through today's workshop activity we will be able to relate and share with the GCISC. So without further ado, we are really honored to have been joined by our speakers, and I would formally like to request Dr. Shafkat Munir, Deputy Executive Director, STPI, to welcome the guests. I would request you to join here at the podium. Okay.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of SDPI, I would like to welcome here, especially I'm thankful to Mr. Razak, UNDP representative. Ahmed Iqbal Chaudhry Sahab will join us in a moment. Same as Honorable Secretary Sahaba, she will be joining us later. And Ms. Sobia Becker and Muhammad Mustafa. Thank you very much. As we know, and of course, Arif Gohir Sahab. He is the lead person with us today and will be leading us through the process. As we know that we are discussing now NDC 3.0, and that is the time when we have all the reviews came up. If you look at the recent stock take, that also tells about us what is the situation. Similarly, the recent global humanitarian overview, that also tells us that we are off track in terms of meeting the targets, whether they were under Paris Agreement or SDGs or the Sydney framework. With this background, as you know, the NDC 3s, they are now would be for next 5 years until 2030, when all the 3 agreements will be completing their tenure by 2030. But if you look at the COP29, where we had commitments which are until 2035, so I feel that there will be some challenges for the countries like Pakistan to develop NDC 3.0 when the commitments are beyond the limit period of the NDCs itself. That is 2030 and the commitments are until 35. So, I'm mentioning this especially because amid this situation, we see that the NDC 3.0 is kind of a climate plan, work plan that should be backed by a budget. If budget is not within the limit or not according to the situation, then certainly it will be challenging. As in the intro, my colleague also mentioned that this day will not only about the thinking about the NDC 3.0, but what we have done so far in our previous NDCs as a country, and what are the gaps and challenges and how we have to mitigate. Primarily, the discussion would be around four pillars of discussion today: mitigation, adaptation, inclusivity, and climate finance. But my understanding, if you look at the global guidelines and discussion going around the NDC 3.0, that tells that more focus would be on adaptation. Because if you look at the finance which will be available for that, and the situation analysis and overview which I just referred to, are talking about something we have to adapt to the situation. In such a situation, NDC 3.0 will largely focus on the adaptation, calling for a political prioritization to adapt and to increase scale and scope of the efforts. The countries are required to identify tangible actions along certain recommendations for effective adaptation, exhibiting how the countries might implement the recommendation either as an input to NDCs or as part of the target in action specifies in NDCs. Now, we cannot see NDCs in isolation. That's why we have to connect with the overall development agenda as well, while we will be discussing the NDC 3.0. There are three basic areas where we have to focus during our discussion today. I will just give a glimpse and a few points on that. Then I will leave the floor for, because I know there are experts sitting here. One is the raising ambitions. In that part, we have to review the recent climate risks and vulnerabilities assessment to look at the most vulnerable sectors and ecosystems, limits to adaptation amid high level of warming. There are limits, but there are warming going on. And the option for transformation adaptation. Then we have to set some measurable targets which are based on national challenges and priorities, risks and vulnerability capacities, national adaptation plan and NDCs. As advised to all the countries or the guideline coming up from the UNFCCC that talks about that there are countries who have to still make their national adaptation plan. But luckily, Pakistan has its NAP 2023, which can guide us through the NDC new draft. So we cannot, isolate NAP 2023 and the target for NDC 3.0 with Pakistan. Similarly, now we have to integrate adaptation into development and tracking mitigation adaptation co-benefits, identify and prioritize adaptation strategies in the NDC, strengthen social protection schemes, enhancing resilience and economic returns from less land degradation or decrease in greenhouse gas emission. So social component we have to insert, because the global humanitarian overview clearly tells us that we are facing disaster or climatic hazard, but there are hardly people have these kind of protection. So that's why that could be a focused area while we will be discussing NDCs 3.0. These are some of the areas where which we have to cover in our emissions part, because we have to be ambitious if we really want to meet our targets. Second thing is that accelerating implementation. This is the implementation part. We have to build synergy with National Adaptation Plan, leverage the output of the process to include the targets and actions in the NDC in line with our NAP 2023. Coordinative governance of adaptation, review policies on climate-sensitive sectors such as water, sanitation, hygiene, agriculture, and infrastructure to build synergies. Ensure adaptation actions at local level are supported and enabled by suitable policies and framework. So again, the focus is localization, and that could be, we have to somehow giving some role to the local governments when, we'll be targeting or setting target for implementation. Then inclusive and participatory approaches. We have to adopt gender inclusive indicators and strengthen planning and implementation actions to be gender responsive. Youth should also be engaged. Local knowledge and traditional actions are leveraged to develop and design for adaptation. Then the next point, which is already part of our 2023 NAP, is the whole of society approach. It should be inclusive and equitable stakeholder engagement at all levels of development of NDC 3.0. Strong science knowledge nexus. We need to improve in-country research on risks and vulnerabilities assessment and deployment of adaptation technologies and solutions. There should be robust monitoring and evaluation and learning meal systems. I welcome Madam Aisha to the meeting. Meal reporting on part of the national planning, budgeting and data system be improved with climate adaptation and resilience lens. Now we have to look at even our development budgets on all kind of development activities with these two lens, which is adaptation and resilience. And that would also be helpful when we will be embedding these things into our budget and budgetary frameworks. Then certainly we will have the climate finance available to some extent at national level. And when we will be accessing the international, that's another thing. The third pillar is the strengthening enablers. Institution and human capacity development goals be included in NDCs, need to include adaptation and resilience in syllabus of secondary or tertiary level education. Unblock adaptation finance, make adaptation plans bankable through appropriate assessment of cost and benefit analysis and by assessing public finance using right financial instruments. I think these are some of the submission which I want to make while the discussion around the technical thing would be there. There will be provincial government involved and the central government with all the private and other private sector and other stakeholders. So I'll conclude here. Thank you very much. Once again, I will welcome all of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shafqat. So he's kind of set the scene for the interventions that today's CSOs, academia, will also be making around NDCs. Without further ado, I would now like to request Mr. Arif Kohir for his welcome remarks. We also have a technical presentation around NDCs later in the day. So Arif Saab, over to you, please. He's also the author for the NDCs 3.0.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honorable Madam Secretary, Ministry of Climate Change, Dr. Samuel Risk, Country Representative, UNDP, Ms. Sobia Becker, GIZ Pakistan, Ali Tokir Sheikh Saab, Shafqat Munir Saab, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. It's indeed a great pleasure that Global Change Impact Study Center and Sustainable Development Policy Institute are co-hosting this workshop on NDCs. We all know that vagaries of climate change are on the rise, and Pakistan is at the forefront of all these vagaries in terms of extreme heat waves, flood events, glacial melt, and sudden pandemic outbreak, health outbreaks, disease outbreaks. So these are the challenges that the country is currently facing. Keeping in view the vulnerabilities of the country and how the country is being affected by these challenges, it is our priority to safeguard our people, to safeguard our communities, and build a resilience in the society. Not only that, we are also to meet the challenge of the international obligations, the challenge that we have committed under the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, in terms of submission of the national communications after every 4 years and biennial update reports, now called as biennial transparency reports, after every 2 years. Simultaneously, we are to submit the national adaptation plans, which we did in 2023. And one of the foremost compliance is on NDCs under Paris Agreement, which holds the, you can say, target of achieving the 1.5 degree target by the end of this century, which is not going to happen now. Because just a couple of months before, the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has categorically, Chair Mr. Jim Skia has categorically said that science is clear that 1.5 degrees C is not possible. 2 degrees C is what that we are striving for, and the 3 degrees C is the most imminent. So these targets are not likely to meet with. We are expecting an overshoot. Paris Agreement's Article 4.2 says that every submission of the countries should be more ambitious than the previous one. We have already committed 50% reduction in emissions. That is huge, keeping in view the vulnerabilities of a country which is hit by these vagaries of 3 times every year. It is now becoming a normal that in February we will be having the heat wave. In February we will be having the glacier melt events, and in July, August, I mean in monsoon season, I will not say floods, but erratic monsoon patterns. They may impinge on floods or drought sort of things. And they have their impacts on the economy, on agriculture, on water availability, and all this. So keeping this in view, we are to bridge between the international commitments and our development pathways. We must be very clear, honest, and robust in terms of scientific clarity, in terms of implementability of the climate action that we commit in the NDCs, and in terms of their ambitiousness too. So this is a critical challenge for a country through which we are passing. And again, ministry is entrusted with to meet this challenge. How effectively this document will determine. GCISC Global Climate Change Impact Study Center has again been declared as the secretariat for this activity. GCISC in the past has been providing the climate-related expertise in terms of climate profiling, in terms of climate risk assessments, and in terms of preparation of the greenhouse gas inventories and contributions to the NDCs too. So as Shafqa Saab has highlighted, we need to think out of box solutions. We need to think about the innovative ways wherein the commitments that we are doing or we intend to do through this document can be met with. It should merely not be a piece of paper or piece of a report, but these should trickle down to the local communities. So that's why we in this workshop took the both horizontal and vertical approaches. In horizontal approaches, we talk about the sectors like energy, transport, industrial processes and product use, agriculture, forestry and land use, and waste sectors. But vertically, we have aligned it in terms of adaptation, mitigation, inclusivity, as well as the climate finance. Every sector has its own challenges, and every response strategy has its own implications. We are in a fourth state of adaptation. So adaptation is our major concern. Luckily, we have national adaptation plan, but as we are saying, we need to think beyond the boundaries. So if we, I don't want to make it more prolonged, but we also need to think about the ongoing discussions in the negotiations on adaptation, because I was following it. When we are talking about adaptation and we are costing it in this NDC document, is NDC exercise, I will expect the adaptation group to delve into two strategies of adaptation. Though the adaptation indicators are yet not clear, but I think, in my opinion, we must be having a discussion on incremental versus transformational adaptation too. What are the implications? What are the costs that are entails to it? The second thing is the ambitiousness mitigation. Can we go beyond our commitment that we made in 2021, or we should broaden the scope of this document instead of the blanket 50% reduction commitment that we did in 2021? We can distribute it across different sectors. This is the second thing. Of course, our development right should not be compromised. This is our priority. This is our red line. The third thing is the inclusivity, for which we all are here. We are to do this NDC commitment in a fashion where the rights of everyone is effectively met with. We have tried to invite the federal government, provincial departments, representatives from academia, think tank, civil society, development partners are there, and media is also there. So these are all our pillars. When we design this document, we should think of, while sitting in Islamabad, about the communities who are suffering from the sea level rise, who are suffering from the glacier melting in the north, and who are suffering from the flash flood events in DG hydronic areas. These are harsh realities the country is currently facing with. So I am putting this challenge before you, and during today's deliberations, I expect from you your expertise, your dedication, and some innovative ideas how the NDC 3 should look like. I am again thankful to SDPI for organizing this event and collaborating with us. Looking forward for the fruitful contribution. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arif Kohir. And as we have listened, Dr. Shafqat and Arif Saab, so it is clear that this year the focus is more towards inclusivity and inclusive, practical, and implementable NDCs is something that's needed for countries like Pakistan. But we also realize that without support of development partners, this kind of commitments is just not possible, because they're the ones who are providing the support in context of capacity building, knowledge transfer, and of course the financial support that's needed. And in this perspective, if we see the UNDP Pakistan's approach towards developing NDC program and providing the technical support, it's commendable. So we are really honored to have been joined by Mr. Samuel Risk, Resident Representative, United Nations Development Program, Pakistan. May I please request you to join us at the podium for your keynote speech, and also request you to share how UNDP Pakistan is shaping the narrative around NDCs. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Pleased to be here with you. Madam Aisha Muriani, Secretary, MOCC, Dr. Gohir, Dr. Munir, Madam Becker. It's a pleasure to be here. Shaping the narrative by UNDP is not really the kind of thing that we actually do. And that's where I think I'm most curious also to hear what happens after this particular meeting, but also from MOCC around what the narrative actually is. And I'll speak a little bit about the narrative at the end as well. So I think as of now and moving ahead, almost everything we discuss now related to climate change is consequential or existential. You may have seen, but if you haven't, we'd be happy to share this with you, that in all of the discussions that actually took place around the IMF deal for Pakistan, most recently in the middle of this year, there was one small interview that took place with the Minister of Finance in Washington, D.C., around September or October during a visit, 25 or 26-minute interview, 25 minutes of which he is speaking about all of the positive developments on the macrofinance. And then the interviewer asked him one last question. So what really concerns you? And he said, basically, there are three existential risks to Pakistan: climate change, population, and stunting. And I think this is why today's discussion is consequential and existential and is not merely about projects and programs moving ahead as well. There's a lot of discussion around support, particularly to MOCC. I believe most of what we are doing in UNDP and perhaps with others as well is more about accompaniment along the journey. We do support, we provide technical assistance, etc., but it's a long, long journey. And with some of the positives and the challenges that we see from NDC 1.0, 2.0, and moving ahead, and we heard that from Dr. Gohir as well, it's a long journey that I think we basically accompany our national partners to get there as well. Particularly proud of a couple of things that are important that have now, I think, made environment and climate part of Pakistan's DNA. The recent recognition that the right to a clean, healthy environment is part of the Constitution is really critical and important now. And I think that makes everything that we discussed today critical and consequential, like I said. So in UNDP, we've been pleased to collaborate and support and accompany the government and MOCC, particularly on policy, on governance, on resilience and capacity, and long-term sustainable development strategies as well. And that's part of the broader discussion around sustainable development goals. On NDCs 2.0, particularly proud that we've also accompanied MOCC to support the formulation, the investment plan, development of national environmental and climate change policies, finance strategies, and most recently drafting the long-term low emissions development strategy for Pakistan, which you might have joined us maybe 2 or 3 months ago in launching as well. There is a difference, however, in NDC 3.0 coming up and the previous ones as well. We're really happy that at the highest level, the Secretary General has asked UNDP to support the UN country team and the country through the Climate Promise Initiative, which works collaboratively with the ministry to coordinate UN-wide support to NDCs and the long-term low-emission strategy planning. So in Pakistan, we are leading on this. We support the UN system and looking forward to collaborating with many actors and entities that are here under the leadership of MOCC particularly to discuss what opportunities there are for financing, mitigation, adaptation, green and blue economies, renewable energy, definitely part of today's discussion, and much more. It is important along these efforts, as we speak federally and everyone together, to empower communities through multiple avenues for resources. I know we talk generally about climate finance and we look at vertical funds, etc. But in many cases, one of these streams is one of the streams that MOCC and us moved forward very quickly with thanks to Madam Coordinator, Madam Secretary, just over the last 6 months to conclude the in-country process for the Global Shield Initiative to against disaster risk reductions. And we're working with a facility in UNDP called the Global Insurance and Risk Finance Facility to add another source of financing related to insurance, given how critical disasters are to Pakistan's development opportunities, not only the 2022 floods, but many other areas as well. And I think one of the important areas with the Global Shield is that Pakistan can access prearranged financing in the event of a disaster. And like I said, the impact of some of these disasters, I think in many cases, not only halts development progress, but also reverses quite a lot of development progress. As was mentioned already earlier, climate resilience works because it is coordinated, because it is integrated, because it is multi-sectoral, and also because it is owned at a grassroots level, and local solutions can and must be prioritized. So I think this idea of localizing the NDCs is really quite important, whether you're in Dadu, whether you're in Chitral, whether you're in Hanna and Orak in Balochistan, impacted by disasters, multiple, then I think it is important for a lot of this to be localized. And this means recognizing the diverse ecological concerns across Pakistan's region, rural and urban, and empowering communities to take their own action. Building community engagement into climate policy is essential and will be successful if all of the efforts pull in one direction. We've learned quite a lot from local and indigenous solutions. Our GLOVE project produces many of these solutions, and every time I visit or many other folks visit, they see what local solutions actually look like. So to a great extent, all of the efforts that we make only also support the ingenuity, the energy, the effectiveness that local communities have already figured out in adapting to the changing climate. Our support to all of this hopefully leaves no one behind. I believe that today's event is timely and highly useful for the improved understanding of NDCs with action, strategies, and policy, and we look forward to what comes next. I close with two things. One, obviously, is there are a lot of these discussions that are taking place. I think throughout the day, we will definitely hear from MOCC and many others that might have been at COP in Baku, what some of the broader discussions are, because it is very strange to be super ambitious in Pakistan where everybody else is not as ambitious. And I think that's the challenge. The voice of Pakistan in the broader community and in the global effort around NDCs is really quite important. And secondly, the team often helps write some of these messages as well. And there's one particular line that I think shows a little bit the contradiction here, that an improved understanding of NDCs and the plan here is mostly about realistic ambitions. I think we have to decide, is it realism or realistic, what we are aiming for, or is it being ambitious? I believe what I hear so far in Pakistan is more about ambition rather than realistic. So wishing everyone the best today, and thanks again for the invitation, and looking forward to NDC 3.0.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel Risk, for sharing the UNDP's progress and the work that the UNDP is doing in Pakistan for NDC 3.0. And yes, it is yet to see whether we are aiming for ambitious NDCs or something that's more practical and implementable. But I'm sure this time it's not going to be ambitious, rather something that's more practical, of course, with the support of all the partners here. I mean, it's good to have positive hopes. Of course, start the day with the positivity, and then, at the end of the day, you will have something concrete around it. I'm sure with the government sitting here, it's going to be what we are expecting. So thank you for your remarks. Before I request Ms. Becker, so Madam Secretary has a meeting at PM office at 11. So Madam, we have GIZ as well, and we definitely request you if you can spare some time to listen here. But again, I would request you to share your remarks, and if you can spare some time to listen to the GIZ's perspective as well, we'd be really grateful. Thank you, please.
Thank you very much for providing me opportunity earlier. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to have interaction with all of you, and I'm so grateful that UNDP is helping us to organize this dialogue, and SDPI and other civil society players are here as well. NDC, as you know, is extremely important, and Gohir has given a good perspective that, the way ministry is approaching and how important inclusivity is for us. But I think we have to be realistic, and we must ensure that the dialogue that we are having here also include some of the government policies which are under process right now. For example, the meeting in the Prime Minister office is on EVs. So one of the commitment that we made in NDC2 was that by 2030, a certain percentage of our vehicles will be EV. Now, it's not, the government doesn't have a magic wand that we will move it and EVs will be all over Pakistan. There is a policy framework. We have to give incentives. We have to see the macroeconomic indicators. We have to engage with our partners, such as IMF. So if, we are unable to implement a certain policy of incentives, we may not be able to achieve the objectives of having EVs. For example, two-wheeler, three-wheeler transformation is one of the biggest priority for the government. But there are, economic development priorities, and then there are the limitations of affordability, for example. Although I think BYD has brought the prices of EV 3 times down than Tesla, and more technology is coming in and prices will keep coming down. But it's very important that we understand the significance of technology and access to it. Because if we are serious about taking care of this planet, unless access to technology is made easier and it's made cheaper, transformation will not happen in the world. If new technology is very expensive, how are we going to adopt it? Like 10, 15 years ago, it was very expensive to have solar panels on your rooftop. The prices decreased, solar panels became popular, and now there is, a large amount of megawatt incorporated in even the government grid. And now the use of that policy is so much that government is thinking that, the flexibility which was given for net metering was so high to promote it that we now need to rationalize it. So that is the impact of incentive and reducing the cost of technology. If that can happen in the energy sector, it can happen in the transport as well. But the technology has to become cheaper and the access has to be made, easier and affordable. Like it's not, people cannot afford a car of 5 million rupee. 50 lakh की गाड़ी कितने लोग ले सकते हैं? Unless we have a vehicle which is maybe 1.5 million, or something which is affordable and cheaper, we would not be able to ensure that commitment that we have already made. So my message to the development partners and to the developed community is that let's get serious about taking care of this planet and make sure that technology spreads and enable us to meet our NDCs. We are fully committed, whether it's adaptation or mitigation. Pakistan has already made a very ambitious target in the NDC2. Now it's time to get down to real dialogue that, we are serious about this planet and we really want to make sure if we are unable to meet the 1.5, let's try to meet at least 2 or 3 what the science is saying. And even that would not be possible if we don't get down to the nitty-gritty. So that, in my view, is the most important aspect: technology transfer and ability to develop local solutions. We have made a start by having establishing Green Tech Hub in Pakistan in collaboration with Ignite, which is promoting innovation, and NUST. We want to engage other universities, and this assignment is given to GCISE to engage all universities in Pakistan. And we would like to be connected with the best R&D centers in the world. And we want to develop local solutions for people of Pakistan in collaboration with Germany, in collaboration with UK, US, France. Let's work together and help the people of Pakistan, not just by giving grant, but establishing your R&D centers in Pakistan and help us to develop those technologies which we need to protect this planet. So I think this is one area where I would really request the development partners sitting here to communicate to your countries that, this is what the Pakistan needs. And let's join hands with Pakistan and get down to serious business. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary, for the remarks. And yes, I think through collaboration and engagement, we can make the success possible. We also have, without further ado, just keeping note of your time, Madam Sobia Becker, Advisor, Park German Climate Energy Partnership, GIZ, her intervention. And after her, Mr. Mustafa will be representing Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition's stance. So, Madam Sobia.
Thank you very much, Zainab. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning, Honorable Madam Secretary, Mr. Samuel Risk, Arif Gohir Saab, Mustafa Amjad, Ali Tokir Sheikh Saab. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, I'm very happy to be here. And this is quite a serendipitous moment because I remember when Pakistan was going to develop its first NDC 1.0, I was also somehow here. So I've been kind of a part of the process from the intentionally or nationally determined contributions to now NDC 3.0, and what an exciting journey it has been. Mrs. Moriani, your words resonated with me a lot, and I'm just reminded as you speak of technology transfer and making technology available, I would like to again express my deepest appreciation for your leadership, for Romina Khurshid Alam's leadership in unlocking this 7.5 million in unconditional finance, 7.5 million euros that Germany will be providing for technology, the latest abatement technology, and it was all thanks to your efforts. So gratefully acknowledge all of that. The event that we have this morning is incredibly important, and I'm very pleased to see that it is indeed so inclusive in that we have civil society, we have provincial representation, and we have so many partners present with us this morning. And at the heart of this collective effort lies the goal of strengthening the nationally determined contributions, which is a key instrument that represents not just climate targets, but the broader aspirations of sustainable development, resilience, as well as equity. So at this National Dialogue on Climate Action, where we're bringing together, or the SDPI is bringing together so many different parts of society, it just underscores the fact that without a whole of society and a whole of government approach, we're not going to make a lot of progress. Pakistan's NDCs are not an end in themselves, but rather they're a means to an end. And what is that end? It is to achieve a systemic transformation. The NDCs, when done right, will provide a national blueprint for sustainable growth, offering a common vision for climate action. However, achieving this is going to require broad collaboration as well as consensus in the public and private sector leadership, strategic capital mobilization, whether that's going to be, whether that's international climate finance or domestic climate finance, as well as a cohesive landscape that functions effectively at both the national and the subnational levels. So in all of these years of accompanying the process, a lot of progress has been made, but still some challenges remain. And aligning priorities across the national and provincial levels is a complex but essential task, which requires coordinated as well as integrated efforts. Climate ambition cannot succeed without meaningful contributions from both the public and the private stakeholders. I think that is clear for all of us. And that the public sector provides the foundation for climate resilient infrastructure and policies, while the private sector plays its role in injecting innovation, technology, as well as financial capital to drive low carbon and climate resilient pathways. So COP29 is now behind us, and Pakistan finds itself at an important juncture. The development of a comprehensive national climate finance strategy has been a significant step forward. This strategy aims to harmonize international and domestic resources while creating a conducive environment for blended finance models that maximize impact. We all understand that climate finance must reach the most vulnerable regions as well as communities of Pakistan, ensuring that these global commitments translate into tangible local benefits. And this is where I've been kind of using the metaphor of a lens to underscore the importance of zooming in and also zooming out. Zooming out is important to get a very good understanding of the global landscape of the international climate policy architecture, and also to identify where opportunities exist to leverage additional benefits for Pakistan. But it's just as important to also zoom in to really see where are the gaps across the national climate policy architecture, what strategic levers exist in doing that, and where can we create opportunities. So, for example, tapping into untapped domestic climate finance flows, whether these are sustainable, blended finance, or other forms of finance. Ladies and gentlemen, ensuring coherence between national climate policies and sub-national implementation remains an ongoing priority, and stronger coordination across ministries, provinces, and sectors is only going to enhance the impact and sustainability of climate actions, whether it's the NDC 3.0 or others. And I welcome Arif's approach of devising these working groups for adaptation and mitigation, the different topics that he's identified, and ensuring that the provinces have a strong voice. Because we all know that a fragmented approach is only going to deliver fragmented results. And this is where the Pak-German Climate and Energy Partnership has been working very closely with the Government of Pakistan, Ministry of Climate Change, GCISC, in strengthening their NDC processes, whether it's in helping the national greenhouse gas inventory get to the next level of maturity, whether it's reporting under the enhanced transparency framework, or in building the capacity at the federal as well as the subnational level. Our efforts are not just about providing technical support, but they're about building trust, fostering partnerships, and ensuring shared pathways that create an ownership of climate solutions. And this is something that we've been doing for almost 70 years now. So, dear colleagues, Pakistan's NDCs symbolize both a challenge as well as an opportunity. They offer a roadmap for aligning climate resilience with economic development. But these aspirations will require your commitment, collaboration, and coherence. And of course, we are here together with our friends at the UNDP. We join hands in supporting not just the NDC 3.0, but also the LT-led strategy. German development cooperation remains steadfast in our commitment to supporting Pakistan's climate leadership. Together with the government, the private sector, and development partners, we're dedicated to ensuring that today's actions are harmonized, well aligned with the goal to creating a sustainable future for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Becker, for once again sharing about the German Development Corporation, GIZ's contribution towards Pakistan's climate agenda. And we are really grateful once again for the development partner support that they're providing in context of setting the climate agenda for Pakistan. Thank you. Now we have the last speaker for the plenary. We have Mr. Mohammad Mustafa, Chair, Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition, and also the Program Director for Renewables First. He will be sharing the stance and why this stance is important. This is coming from this organizations who have been working around energy transition in Pakistan, and it's extremely important that this time, as Arif Saab also mentioned, that we are going to be working towards a balanced approach in context of NDC 3.0. So the balanced approach means as the working group will also be doing the activities that's around adaptation, mitigation, resilience, and inclusivity. So around mitigation, what are the key pointers that we need to keep in mind while developing NDC 3.0? So Mustafa, if you can please join us over the podium.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. Honorable guests, attendees, again, thank you for this very important discussion that we'll be undertaking today. I think the speakers before me have highlighted the importance of why we are here today. The NDC process in itself, we've heard a lot about why is it important, but what it means for Pakistan is all the more important to understand. And a 1.5C target means the existing situation in Pakistan to persist. And we already realize what the existing situation looks like. Dr. Arif very well highlighted the doom and gloom surrounding what a 1.5C could essentially mean for Pakistan year in and year out. So normalizing conversations about a 2.0C target or a 3.0C target at this moment, essentially, this is something that the people of Pakistan, that jeopardizes the future of Pakistan. And if anything, Pakistan should be at the forefront of ensuring this 1.5C degree target. That, I think, is the important message that, we should keep in mind while working in groups and planning out the NDC document. Ambition is lack of ambition or realism wouldn't help Pakistan's future. And that is where I think it's really important to understand that this NDC is the last chance alone. There is not going to be another NDC that can salvage the 1.5C. So the next 5 years become all the more important. And that is where I think the conversation today will have to have a cognizance of the importance of why we need to be ambitious in this document. Obviously, realism will only get us to where we are today. Realism will only make the floodings worse, the heat waves worse. It's a time for ambition, and that is exactly what the Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition would expect from any NDC submission that Pakistan puts out. On that note, I also want to highlight the backdrop against which we are working. I think Madam Secretary very well highlighted, Mr. Risk also highlighted, the lack of ambition at a global stage. Yet Pakistan in itself, the 2022 floods were a warning of what would be the norm going forward. We feel like, low carbon development will be the only form of development that happens across the globe going forward. So saying that, Pakistan can develop while being at odds with climate change mitigation or adaptation is essentially not something that's a feasible solution or an outcome going forward. That remains true for each and every developing country, but more so for Pakistan, which is essentially or unfortunately ground zero for any climate change, disaster. So on that note, I think it's also important to understand that while Pakistan is very vulnerable, we've been unable to access the existing climate finance. So while the ambition isn't really there from global communities to increase climate finance, Pakistan has still been unable to tap into what is available. And on that note, it's really important to understand that each and every funding opportunity that Pakistan will get, be it for, ensuring that we meet our budget requirements, or for PSDP, or for development, or for any other ambition that is linked to development for the country. We have to be very cognizant that each and every facet of money that flows into Pakistan will be linked to climate change going forward. It's really important to understand that all of the IMF loans that we talk about, World Bank grants, funds, USAID, each and every money that will flow into Pakistan going forward will have a very dedicated climate lens and angle to it. So what that essentially means is that our NDC document will have to be robust enough for us to ensure that each and every thing or financing facility that we target can be linked back to this document. So reiterating what Madam Sobia Bikar highlighted, the NDC is a blueprint for Pakistan's development. It is not a complementary document anymore. This is as good as any Vision 2025, Vision 2047. This is essentially the document that will guide Pakistan's development going forward. And that is why I think it's very important that you put in the hours, we put in the time, we put in the effort, and we put meaning to the words that Madam Secretary highlighted, the whole of government approach, the whole of society approach. It's essentially meaningless if we don't build a bottom-up NDC, right? So it rather than a trickle-down effect, I think it's important that we actually start building the basic blocks of the NDC from the communities, from the provinces, and then collect it all together into a national document. So ultimately, not only the ambition, but also the responsibility goes hand in hand with what we've put out as Pakistan's plan for the future. So I think in terms of stance, again, we will be talking more about it on, and the Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition has also prepared a document, a strategy paper of sorts that we will be submitting to GCISC for the NDC revision. But some important things that I think we would need to be very mindful of. Number one, baselining. So the amount of time we've been questioned internationally on Pakistan's baseline for emissions is getting all too frequent. It's important to understand that we need to make sure that that baseline is very robust. It's not questioned. It's based in data. It's based in real time data that is traceable, that can be tracked. That is something that a lot of donors can look at and say, okay, we can verify that. There is an MRV mechanisms around that, and that is something that allows us to essentially measure our mitigation reduction potential for each and every project and for each and every development goal that we set. So while we'll be setting sectoral targets in this NDC, it's also very important to ensure that the baseline is set in a manner which is backed by data. We also need to work on the projections. So the last NDC projected a 7% GDP growth per year for Pakistan. The last year was minus 0.2. This year we projected at 3.5% growth. So we're well on track on meeting the NDC targets that we set out for ourselves in NDC 2.0, but that's essentially because we didn't grow at the pace that we set out to grow. So we do not want to circumvent or greenwash or essentially say that Pakistan did really well or complied with the NDC process. It's essentially making sure that we put out a submission that the world can get behind. So it should be ambitious enough that Pakistan can bank on other international organizations and the development partners to come together and ensure that Pakistan actually achieves its ambitious target. It should be ambitious enough because Pakistan remains at the forefront of climate change, and I cannot reiterate that stronger yeah, it's a fact. We are ground zero for climate change, and our NDC ambition will have to reflect that in our document. I also think it's really important in terms of timelines and robustness of the document. So the NDC document is just a single submission, but it accompanies an NDC investment plan, an NDC implementation plan, an NDC capacity building plan, a technology transfer plan, a long-term LTLEDS plan. So all of these are plans that will need to come hand in hand with the NDC document. We can't have an NDC being submitted in 21 and then wait 3 more years for, the investment plan to come through. These are, again, real challenges where I expect the development partners to also play a major role going forward. So I think it's really important that this document is very complete, it's very robust, it's implementable. And when I say it's implementable, it shouldn't be a document that's just there for basing our future decisions off. It should be something that each and every government official understands, has a role to play in, understands what they are expected to do, understand what they get out of it. So we cannot, say the 35% will come through international financing or funding without highlighting or specifying what those funding facilities will look like, what those targets will actually achieve, where are we going to utilize those funding facilities, how are we going to tap into those funding facilities. So having that clarity at this time, we have a whole year. I think that is where we feel like, it's a good time to kind of start having these conversations, but with the expectation that the NDC 3.0 will be the guiding document for Pakistan's future development. One last thing, and I really want to highlight this as well, as Pakistan's ambition to show leadership at the climate stage. So Pakistan, while being vulnerable, also needs to understand that it is not going to be its vulnerability that will give us the token of leadership at the global climate stage. It will be our ambition. So we have to be ambitious if we want to assume the leadership position. We cannot, sell our floods anymore. We cannot sell our disasters anymore. We'll have to sell our ambition going forward. And this document will serve as the blueprint for that ambition. So I think it's really important to understand that Pakistan cannot continue banking on coal while also peddling the narrative of climate disasters. So it's really important that those two don't go hand in hand. If we want to assume leadership in the climate space, we'll have to actually let go of certain development goals that we've set out for ourselves. And that is where I think it's really important that the whole of government approach plays a part. I think we need to sit down and actually strategize of what is available for us out there. We cannot continue leveraging our future against stuff that's outdated, that's not ready to be supported anymore. We have to be cognizant of where the international development funding and facilities will flow. We have to be well aware of what the future will look like and play our part in ensuring that Pakistan is at the forefront of maximizing the utility of what's available out there. So on that note, I think I'll stop here, but with the promise that the 17 organizations that are a part of Pakistan Renewable Energy Coalition are at your disposal, be it GCISC, the Ministry of Climate Change, the development partners, in ensuring that whatever document Pakistan puts out is ambitious enough, is robust enough, and is implementable. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. And the best part is whenever PDEC gets engaged, We always get to see the eye opener, sometimes the harsh realities. And I think without speaking harsh realities, it's not a good practice to talk about documents like NDCs and other strategy around climate agenda. So thank you for that. Um, with this, the plenary session comes to an end, but right after this, we have a 10-minute break. And after that, we have civil society organizations and provincial stance. We have Ms. Aisha Khan with us. We have Mr. Ali Tokir. We will be joined by Mr. Ahmed Iqbal shortly. We have representatives from provinces who have joined us online. So it's very important to take into account their stances as well and what are their thoughts around NDCs, what work exactly they're doing, and what is the voice from the civil society organization that we'll be hearing from Madam Aisha. So without further ado, if I can request the plenary speakers to join us here for a group photo, and then we'll proceed for the short tea break. And after that, Arif Kohisa will set the scene for the session 2, and then we'll engage civil society organizations and the provinces for the stance on NDC 3.0. Thank you. Madam Aisha, Ali Tokir sir, please join us.
Hello, excuse me, if I can request everyone to please settle down. We'll be starting the next session shortly.
Requesting everyone to please take seats. We're about to start the roundtable discussion session.
Yes, thank you. If I can request our colleagues to please settle down. So thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us. We're starting a second session on strengthening NDC implementation and climate communications. And the way the discussion has been structured is that we'll initially start from a technical presentation on NDCs from Arif Gohir from GCISC. And then we'll be taking some suggestions, comments from the partner organizations stating here, definitely starting from Ma'am Aisha, the Chief Executive of CSCCC. We have two coalitions. We have Ali Toki Sheikh Saab with us, and also a lot of experts that have joined us across the roundtable. If I can request our colleagues at the back to please settle down. Yeah, thank you. So without any further ado, let me invite Arif Gohir Saab on the stage for his presentation. Thank you so much. If I can also request the MIS team to kindly display the presentation. And is this working? Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Welcome back after the plenary and tea. Hope you are feeling energized now. I will be just taking 20 minutes from you, and then ball will be in your court, and I will be a listener, and you will be the ones who will be providing the technical inputs that will be taken account while developing the NDC 3. So we all know that under the Paris Agreement, Article 4, every country is to submit its nationally determined contributions after every 5 years. Pakistan submitted its first NDC in 2016, wherein Pakistan committed to reduce 20% of its projected to till 2030 emissions, subject to the availability of the international finance and support. Then in 2021, Pakistan again submitted or revised NDC, where Pakistan committed to reduce 50% of its emissions across different sectors. And the bifurcation was that 15% will be met through the national resources, whereas for remaining 35%, we will be seeking the international financial support. In the NDCs, we talked about, we gave a stock take of the previous NDC, I mean 2016. We said that from 2016 till 2018, Pakistan has contributed to the reduction of 8.7% of the emissions. Then we, in the second NDC, also included new sectors like blue carbon, ecosystems, health, waste. There is little mention of carbon markets. Pakistan mentioned about its flagship program, 10 billion tree tsunami at that time, and now upscale Green Pakistan program phase 1, wherein Pakistan committed that in by the next 10 years, Pakistan will be able to sequester almost 150 million tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. Then our second NDC was inclusive in terms of youth and gender. We dedicatedly produced a document with the support of the IUCN Climate Change Gender Action Plan across 6 sectors. Sorry. Then in the NDC, we talked about 4 actions in mitigation. Pakistan submitted that by 2030, Pakistan will be able to increase the share of renewable to the tune of 60%. Pakistan committed, since electric vehicle policy was there at the time, and Pakistan committed that by 2030, 30% of the new vehicles will be the electric vehicles. And then Pakistan talked about moratorium on coal power plants, more reliance on the local coal than imported coal. And then Pakistan, in terms of adaptation, talked about nature-based solutions. Then Indus Basin flood risk mitigation and enhanced water recharge. Pakistan committed to enhance the protected areas cover from 12% to 15% by 2023. So these are the commitments that are enshrined in 2021 document. Then Pakistan made a commitment, as I already mentioned, that while we developed a trajectory of emissions in 2016 at the growth rate of 7.5% in line with the Vision 2025 of Pakistan, we were expecting to reach 1,600 million ton by the end of 2030. In 2018, when we prepared the inventory, our emissions were 489.87 million, from where we reduced that, we have been able to reduce the 8.7% of the emissions. Then, while committing the targets, we categorized that 50% emissions will be reduced. As per trajectory 1, 15% will be from the national resources, and 35%, I mean 560 million ton, will be from the international supports provided by different countries in UNC. After developing that document, Ministry of Climate Change designated provincial focal points, because these all commitments have to be complied at the level of the provinces. So every province is now having the focal point for NDCs. They are having their own action plan now. From the exercise that the Ministry of Climate Change done during 2022-23, they sat with the provinces and identified 59 priority actions that are to be executed by 2030. The financial worth of these financial action plans is 2.367 billion. These are at the different stages, at different locations, and there is a inclusive role of private sector, civil society, the government institutes, I mean the provincial institutes. So these are there. These priority sectors are across various mitigation actions, like in energy, on renewable energy, that there are projects on distributed generation, energy access, renewable to displace thermal energy, and then green hydrogen. In energy efficiency, since in 2022, there was NEEC policy, the National Energy Efficiency Policy. There are some projects on energy efficiency. like adoption of energy efficient equipment, machinery, and appliances, reduction in line losses, demand side management, and green building codes. That few of the interventions that are in the 59 priority actions. In industrial processes, there are projects on adoption of cleaner production techniques, technology adoption, I mean, then industrial sectors, national environment quality standards, efficiency in the industries, and waste heat recovery. So these are the 4 priority actions in industrial processes. In transport, there were not, interest was there, but you can say it was not, provinces were very much eager how we will be able to do that, because it is not possible without the financial support. So the projects were on vehicular emissions control, replacing old 2 to 3 wheelers with the EVs, EV infrastructure creation, because there was no policy at that time, but it is somehow embedded in the priority actions. Then waste is another sector across around which there were 3 priority options, like waste management and waste to energy, and then sustainable consumption and production by giving awareness to the communities about the waste reduction. Then there were priority actions regarding adaptation. These were around loss and damage management, about better management automation, like early warning systems, linking early warning systems with the management operations at in agriculture, water sector, capacity building, role of technologies in the matter management plans. Then there were some priority actions on decision making, like automated national and provincial disaster management operational centers and district level disaster management. So these were few of the adaptation related decision making priority actions that provinces committed. The 4th one was the health management. So the proposals were on trauma centers, establishment, and health management program under the public-private partnership mode. Then there were some priority actions across co-benefits, you can say, both that cover both mitigation and adoption. So the projects were around on resilience building, adaptation, vulnerability assessments, and overall climate change management. So a long list of projects are there in the cross-cutting area of adaptation and mitigation. Now, what we have achieved so far, it's a work in progress. And when we started this process by the end of September, then we have been able to link with some of the federal and provincial ministries, and that's what we have get till now. But what we are doing in the way forward will be in the ensuing slides. So regarding the transition to 60% renewable, we have been able to get the figure of 5,061 megawatt with the bifurcation of hydro, wind, solar, net metering, like. And then there are some off-grid solar increase. We have tried to get the data from different sources, but till now we have been able to. But I am sure that since the import of the solar is very high in the country, so I'm not pretty confident about this figure. But since Mustafa Saab is here, he will be able to provide some thoughts and reflections on it. Then one of the achievement was national energy efficiency and conservation policy, which talks about savings of 35 million tons or oil equivalent savings. And then new indicative generation capacity expansion plan. It is still in the final stages of approval. And it is keep on changing times and again in terms of the energy mix. In the plan, which I know almost 1 month before, it was that by the 2031-32, we will be able to include 60% renewables in the energy mix. Then we talked about moratorium on coal power plants. So Muzaffargarh and Rahim Yar Khan coal power plants were replaced by Azad Patan hydropower project of 700 megawatt that will start functioning in 2027. Then we talked about coal use, and from here you can see that the share of the imported coal has been reduced from 14 million to 8.9 million ton, and the share of the local coal has been increased from 4.9 million ton to 15 million ton. We talked about plantations in 2019. We were having 492 million plantations, but as of now, it is around 2.3 billion plantations. We committed the protected area cover increase from 12 to 15% by 2023, but as of now, we are having a 19.93% protected area cover as per Upscale Green Pakistan program. We talked about Indus Basin flood risk mitigation and enhancement of water recharge. So GCF project of 77 million being dealt by WWF has now been approved and it's have started functioning. Then we talked about the continued investments in nature-based solutions. So Upscale Green Pakistan is very much functioning. We talked about the market and non-market based carbon approaches. Carbon market policy guidelines have been approved, and now we are in the process of hosting in the carbon registry at Global Change Impact Study Center. So this is a brief of achievements what we have done so far, but it's a work in progress. We are getting some quantified values from the provinces as well, but in the due course of time, we will be able to have it. In the NDC 3 process, again, Ministry of Climate Change is the national designated agency, and they have declared GCISC as the secretariat of it. This time, we want to see this NDC document more inclusive in the participation of not only the government, federal and provincial, but also with the involvement of the think tanks, civil society, academia, and development partners, and even media. So I'm thankful to SDPI for organizing this event in a fashion that we can ensure the inclusivity of all the stakeholders on the tables. The today's deliberations, we can say confidently, most of the partners are there in the deliberation process. Thankful to the development partners, GIZ is sitting here. Sobia Becker, who have committed a number of activities. Shirasa was here in the morning from UNDP. He has committed a number of activities. Some activities are from UNICEF, from International Migration Organization. SDPI will be contributing to this endeavor. A number of partners are contributing to this activity. So this is the institutional arrangements for the NDC revision. There are 3 technical committees and then 2 approval committees. The first technical committee is on adaptation. That is handled by the Ministry of Water Resources and their institute, Federal Flood Commission, will be doing that. And this committee will be having the 7 working groups around water, agriculture, human health, forestry, biodiversity, disaster preparedness, and gender. There was a request from UNICEF to include children as well. So this working group will be including gender and children. To support this Federal Flood Commission, yesterday UNDP committed a resource. Ahmad Kamal Saab, when he was the chair of the Federal Flood Commission, he provided input, he led that committee. Now he will be supporting that committee. So we are learning from the experiences, and that is in very much line with one of the sayings of my mentor, Ali Taqi Sheikh Saab. Pakistan के system में कोई legacy नहीं है, sir. Technical लोगों को on board लेना है. So this is a reflection. We have taken Ahmad Kamal Saab on board for this adaptation committee, sir. The second committee is on mitigation. That is led by Ministry of Energy, the department PPIB. And it will be having the 5 working groups across energy, transport, agriculture, industrial processes, land use, and waste. So again, they are vested with to have a stock of the mitigation interventions that have been done, the priority areas where we can plunge in, and identification, if possible, of different projects along with the costing of those projects. The third technical committee is hosted at GCISC, wherein we are presently preparing the greenhouse gas inventory for the year 2024. Usually there is a lag of data almost 1 year. So, I mean, the 2024 data we will be able to get in by the June 2025. But through the active penetration of the Ministry of the Climate Change, we have been able to secure the data, and the inventory process is very much on the way, and we are hoping that by end of this month we will be having the 23-24 inventory. Then stock take of achievements. In the previous slide I have highlighted a few. This is also being done here. Then after the work of these committees, this work in the form of a document along with the document that will be produced by STPI will be provided to GCISC, and from there, with the support of the technical experts, we will develop a NDC draft for submission to the steering committee at the Ministry of Climate Change level, and after approval from there, it will be taken to the Climate Change Council for onward submission to UNFCCC. So this is the process we are trying to follow. So this is just a glimpse of the inventories that GCISC, not including 1994, the remaining inventories have been prepared by GCISC. When we submitted the updated NDC, the emissions were 489.87, but I don't know whether it is a right time to, you might be seeing this a value in parentheses 522. Why it is so? It is in line with the Sharm el-Sheikh decision, wherein countries committed that for the sake of transparency and consistency, IPCC 2006 guidelines will be followed, as well as the IPCC AR5 global warming will be followed. When we prepared the 2018 greenhouse gas inventory, at the time we followed IPCC 2006 guidelines, but the global warming potential used was of IPCC AR2 assessment report. And for the sake of transparency and consistency, IPCC say that when new rules or guidelines are emerged, all previous inventories have to be converted to those guidelines as per UNFCCC decisions. So actually in 2018, we were at 522 as per new guidelines. And again, in 2021, we are 521 million tons. You will see a slight decrease in emissions from energy sector. These may be, not maybe, rather surely due to the increase of solar into the grid. Next slide. So this is the real slide on which I invited your attention. What is new that we are trying to do in the NDC 3? It should merely not be a document, as said by different keynote speakers today morning. It should reflect something. It should be ambitious as well as implementable. So we have identified a couple of things that were not NDC 2, but now we are trying to include in NDC 3. In NDC 2, there was a blanket, you can say, statement of 50% reduction in emissions. There was not written anywhere that which sector will reduce how much emissions. In the present NDC, we are trying to distribute the reduction targets across various sectors. So this NDC will be segregated into provincial as well as sectoral targets. So this is one thing that we are trying to do. We are also trying to include new sectors in it, like bioeconomy, green building policies there, green hydrogen. The work is being done at NICA. We are in the recent inventory trying to include F gases, which were not previously included in the inventories. Children, I mentioned that it is another aspect and that we are trying to include in it. One of the reasons that we were not able to get ample finance from the previous NDCs was that there was no quantified values. There was no dollar sign against any intervention that we're trying to do. So this time, this NDC we are envisioning to be a business case wherein we can get some funding for the tangible projects, both for adaptation as well as mitigation. So as in my plenary talk, I told that we are aiming to make this NDC implementable, keeping in view the national circumstances, so it will be evenly poised, keeping in view the mitigation and adaptation options as well. So marginal abatement cost curves, the new technologies, what the cost will be, how will we be mitigating the gases. So these are, and how we will be, though we are not having presently adaptation indicators for some of the areas, but for some of the areas for agriculture and water, GCISE have, with the involvement of international consultants, developed some indicators on which there is a consensus from the provinces. And we are now trying to pull the data into the platform. So this will be very much part of their, there will be assessment of the innovative financial instruments. On the parallel side, an adaptation costing exercise based on the adaptation interventions that are part of the National Adaptation Plan. This is being done. This adaptation costing will also be part of this NDC 3. In the past NDCs, we talked about only with the perspective of SDG 13, I mean climate change. Now, climate change is seen as a point of view of intersectionality. So it builds around across all sectors, across all SDGs. So there will be approach wherein NDC will be synced with SDGs as well as the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. Pakistan in 2023 made the clean air policy. Pollution is a growing concern for the country, and most recently there is a report by IPBES on planetary crisis. So we are trying, and based on that report, IPCC has also tried to develop a dedicated report on short-lived climate forcers. So there is a linkage between the greenhouse gases and the climate pollutant, other gases other than GHGs. So black carbon is one of the important segment, and it is responsible for the poor air quality in the country. We will try to include this in it. We signed the methane pledge, and in fulfillment of that, we are trying to develop the methane roadmap, and by January 2025, this methane roadmap will be there. So based on the roadmap, there will be identification of different projects across the potential sources of methane emissions, like rice cultivation, wherein we are working with the Asian Development Bank on low carbon rice. And it will contribute also to the carbon market sort of things. We are also trying to work with the USDA on nitrogen roadmap. This is another area we want to reflect in that NDCs. And one of the area is emissions from enteric fermentation from livestock, on which we are still silent. We at the ministry level are not doing something really good. But I would be, through these discussions on mitigation and adaptation co-benefits, I will be seeking your inputs on it. So we are talking about just transition. We are talking about switching to new technologies. So green skills are essential part of it. Thanks to GIZ, they proposed that idea and they're working on it. We are trying to include the green skills in it. Since carbon market policy is approved now, so in the coming months, within 3 months that is envisaged by the ministry, we have a complete ecosystem of carbon market in the country, including the carbon rules and regulations as well as the carbon registry functional. So these are my thoughts on it. And now if you have any questions, clarifications, I am available. But this is the thought print of GCISC. But you are requested to take it forward, include your voice into it, what you want this NDC to be more ambitious, Mustafa Saab said, implementable, Sobia said. Sheikh Saab is also proponent of doing what has been committed. And Madam Aisha is there. So we have put you in a challenge, in a position where you can share your thoughts and guide us where we are headed to and where we should be headed to. With this, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Arif Saab. I think after this comprehensive presentation, we're all as versed as anyone could be around the what the NDCs are, what's gonna come forward. If I can just request our MIS team to display the slide in which we had actually the comparison of NDC 2.0 and 2.3 and what's new coming up. So again, it will provide us a very good platform to sort of bring our intervention. So again, taking lead from what Arif Saab I think initially has been mentioned, let's have this roundtable discussion around the proposed actions on how these commitments can be met and how do we actually keep that balance between adaptation and mitigation priorities. How can the developments be made more inclusive? And again, yeah, thank you so much for the slide on. Let's also sort of share reflections around these as well. So again, just very quickly sharing on what the format is going to be, we can do the discussion over the round table. So perhaps we have three coalitions. We'll be taking those, and then definitely we have Ali Toki Sheikh Saab, one of the key experts, and then will be other experts who are sitting us from the different financing institutions, development partners as well. But without any further ado, we're very honored to have with us Ms. Aisha Khan, the Chief Executive of Civil Society Coalition for Climate Change, CSCCC. So ma'am, thank you so much, and with this, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, SDPI, for organizing this very timely consultative meeting, and to Arif Gohir Saab for the excellent presentation that has set the stage. And I was here to listen to the earlier remarks from Sam, and Sobia still here with us. So taking all of that into account, my small observations that I want to share with you are that we have to take into account that when the first iteration was made, it was done in haste. When the second iteration was made, I think it overreached its capacity, and largely for political reasons. Now we've come to the third iteration, and this is a time when there's a certain amount of sobriety that has been injected into everyone who is preparing them, for two reasons. One, that the global impacts of climate change are being felt across the globe, and two, because in the third iteration, everybody's had enough experience to know what didn't work and what is more likely to work and how to structure them. Generally, the conversations that I've attended so far regarding this always seem to suggest that Pakistan's NDC 2.0 was already very ambitious, so we don't need to enhance our level of ambition. But here I would like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that the UNFCCC has certain normative requirements. And under that, when countries submit their NDCs every 5 years, they have to present their highest possible ambition. So we can't run away from that because we are a signatory of the Paris Agreement. We have to show progression from the previous NDC. So no matter how much the level of ambition was, we cannot reduce that level of ambition in the third. And it also has to be informed by the GST, which has taken place in Dubai. So taking those things into account, I think the planning process becomes very important. And we have to focus a lot on the assumptions on which we are basing the preparation and also on the methodologies and the approach. So I think what the parties need to do and to demonstrate is how and why are we presenting what we think is fair and ambitious. There was some talk about calling it ambitious or realistic. I think we should make it realistically ambitious, and we should be cautiously optimistic about how it will unpack itself. So how do we move forward? Few thoughts that I want to share on the methodology. Mr. Arif Gohir has already talked about including the provinces and their input, making it more collaborative, more inclusive. But what I would personally like to see, Mr. Gohir, is that you start calling them PDCs. You know, they should be provincially determined contributions that come to you from the provinces themselves. So instead of them feeling that they're just being included tokenistically, they actually have done their, if they don't have the capacity to produce their own GHG inventories, that you support them, guide them. This also builds their capacity, helps them to prepare the NDCs. And once you've prepared a document yourself, you take ownership and you can be made and held also more responsible. You've talked about sectoral inventories, and I think that is very good. But within that, I think we need to be very careful what commitments we are making, because they have to be aligned with our energy policy and they have to be aligned with our NAP goals and targets that we've already committed. So once you have the PDCs, you're putting together something which will be piecemeal but can become incremental, and even when you show that in your methodology that you went through that process, it will have better credibility, and whatever constraints and challenges you're sharing will become more credible. When we divide the costs or the responsibility between conditional and non-conditional, I think instead of being vague, we need to be a little more quantitative over there also. And the quantitative part is should not be aligned should not be left unattended or vague, like it was 15% and 35% and overall 50%. I think you just showed us some slide in which you have done the sectoral emission quantification. So we need to go back and identify the sectors to say where do we intend to reduce, because let's remember that Pakistan is a country where our emissions actually are also likely to increase annually. Our population growth rate is such, and the consumption and production patterns are such, that whatever we are committing can get neutralized as we progress. We may be meeting our commitments, but by the time you measure them 5 years from now, you might find that you're still standing where you are through no fault of your own, but because the external compulsions have contributed towards that. I also suggest, if possible, to use the newly formed Climate Authority to assist you in this, because although we continuously talk about taking an all of society approach, personally I find that, you know, we still continue to work in silos. The last thing that I want to say over here is about, you know, your attribution of the role, responsibilities, and the timelines that you follow and the conditionalities that you put. We always link it to finance, 15% set our own resources, 35%. I think we should shift that narrative and we should start linking it to the goals and commitments made by the major polluters. Because if we don't have the enabling environment, under which to work, and we keep, and you did refer to loss and damage and other issues, social and economic issues, if we keep diverting our resources towards dealing with the costs that come to us during the years, then the funds allocation and the conditions under which we move towards mitigation are also shifted. So I think we need to make that very clear, that the overall global role of the high emitting mitigators should be factored into the commitments that we are making. If they stay on course, we will be more likely to stay on course. If they stay off course, the impacts of that will derail us. So that should be the justification, instead of all the time saying, give us the money and we will do this. So these are some of the points that come to my mind right now, and happy to hear the views from Ali Tauqir Sheikh Saab and other civil society actors to see how we can actually this time prepare an NDC that that is more targeted, because I think quantifying things always helps you to follow and monitor and gauge your own progress. So along with the NDC, do consider putting together a very robust framework for monitoring, because without your annual monitoring of where things are going, north or south, you'll be able to do mid-course corrections before the next iteration is due.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful interventions, Ms. Aisha. Yeah. And we'll make sure that Arif Sab, after again today's workshops, will also sort of compile everything into a document that can be sent to you. But again, extremely important, talking both on the quantitative as well as qualitative side. Again, just before coming to Lisa, we'll just take one more. We do have the representative from the Alliance for Climate Justice and Clean Energy, ACJCE, Mr. Zain Maulvi. Zain, if you would like to sort of highlight any your interventions, and then we'll come to Aritoki Sheikh Saab. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Obed, and Assalamu alaikum to everyone. And thank you also for the opportunity. So I do want to take up this this idea of the realism versus ambition debate, and the idea of realistically ambitious as well. And I want to suggest that, look, amidst all this discussion about technology transfers, data, evidence, have we met 2.0 yet? Should we focus on that? Should we expand our ambition in the form of leadership? We're missing something very important, which is climate justice. The justice angle does not depend simply on the idea of pushing forth some kind of high ambition. And it does not also depend on just following through realistically and keeping yourself within those 4 frames of what you're committing, because that's all you can commit at the moment. It's about moral leadership. And we've seen that the biggest climate wins of this century have been by those who've taken on that moral leadership. That's AOS's and LND Fund. Barbados and the finance frameworks that we're now trying to reform at a global level. So that's centered. And I want to go back to the Article 4, and I want to say this is one part of it that we keep missing, which is that when you do scale up to your highest ambition, you must reflect the CBDR and respective capabilities in light of different national circumstances. There is not a single discussion or word about how that translates into the way we understand our NDC ambitions, the way we understand what NDC commitments amount to for us. Right? So there's several other points that I can mention just in a cascading form that are relevant in this. Simple example of why this is important, and to go back to the provincially determined question, is what about interprovincial equity? Is that a feature that is significant for us? What about the question of accountability for prior financial frameworks or bad debts that Pakistan is a part of? There's a global umbrella that the Paris Agreement functions within. It's not an isolated silo unto itself. It is in tandem with a lot of conventions and a lot of discussions that are now coming up, including, for instance, new trade conventions, including, for instance, framework changes to the UNCITRAL frameworks, the trade laws, including, for instance, the question of tax conventions and also debt reframing. Right? We're moving beyond the debt frameworks of the past. So all of these discussions need to be looked into in tandem. So beyond 15 and 35, beyond conditional and unconditional, beyond development partners and concerns that might come in from the finance side of the equation, what do we have to say about Pakistan's debt commitments, for instance, and our debt burdens? Last 2 years, we have spent 11 times more on debt servicing alone than the entirety of the PSDP envelope. To just put it bluntly, all this discussion about the need for finance flows and how to quantify and how to provide evidence, etc., falls flat in the face of the most biggest impact investment that you can make, getting a debt framework restructuring, right? Moving on to 2 or 3 other, let's say, zimni baatein jo hain. One of them, for instance, is this question of the province one that I raised, and it's very significant. Pakistan today, and I was seeing the detail, the data, we don't have a hydropower policy. We claim to have hydropower as inclusive in our 60% ambitions, but then we go along and replace coal by hydropower, whereas our alternative renewable energy policy says hydropower is not a renewable source. And our provincial crisis reflects this. Sindh has been at odds with all of our energy policy commitments, including the IG 71 and this one. Right? So these are certain considerations that need to be sort of looked into more deeply in our NDC commitments as well. Two other points. One is communities. A lot of lip service to the idea of community participation, community governance, community consensus building, and so on and so forth. And yet we do not know what community amounts to. Climate stewardship principles under the UN and other existing trendsetters on discourse suggest that it's about knowledge. It's about not participation. Like, hey, come and join in peace. Give your 2 cents on the voice. No, it's about their knowledge structures and their capacities to know and understand the worlds that we live in better than what we know, better than our funders, better than our deaf partners, with all due respect to everyone here, and better than us. So it's not as if we are somehow, so there's that aspect of it which needs to be talked about. Our NDC commitments need to clarify, what do we understand by it? What do we understand by community ownership, and what do we understand by the respective resources that we can get? Two last remaining points that I think are significant in this regard. The first is that when we talk about all of these issues on the NDC commitments, there's a large spectrum of greenwashing. Corporate agriculture is the biggest way by which we are proceeding. Water is now a wholly provincially owned subject, apparently outside of even those indigenous structures of use, and this is true of land as well. So where do we feature in that, and do the NDCs want to say more than just lip service to these broad categories that they've basically ripped off of UNFCCC, ADB, World Bank, and IMF narratives? And the last thing that I want to point out is Article 9A is something that's a game changer in more ways than one. Right now, we're thinking about quantification, evidence, data. Indigenous knowledge doesn't think in these terms. And if you want to make a really impactful account on how things will move, you can see that legal liability trends across the world right now are talking about transboundary legal liability beyond CBDR. The UNFCCC ambitions are not the only thing right now that are grounding the real cutting-edge works that is happening. So my last suggestion would be we need to talk about what 9A does, what it does for the translation of NDCs, what it does for the radical reordering of our ambitions locally and internally, and finally, what does it do for us? Remember, it's every person who will now have that right. That includes those of us who are not nationals to this country, but are here for some reason. That includes you, sir, from Germany, you, madam, from other spaces, and the UN representatives too. And if that right now exists, there is a space for us to talk about ambitions beyond the strictures of the four corners of what the NDCs amount to. So my hope is that we get these thoughts involved, and climate justice becomes something we can push beyond the realistic ambition doctrines.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan. Well noted points, especially around the debt showing communities, and the last 2 points that you mentioned around the greenwashing Article 9A. So I think with this, we do have one of the very leading experts with us, and teacher and master of most of us sitting here in the climate space. So thank you so much, Alisa, for joining us. If I can just request you for your interventions. Yeah, if you want to join us on the podium, please do. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, and I wish to thank SDPI for hosting us, Gohir Saab and his colleagues for excellent work and the presentations, which are very thought-provoking. And of course, I have benefited immensely. I'm so happy that I came in the morning with the very first speaker. I've learned so much, and so many of speakers have mentioned very graciously, and not because I know more about this, but only because I'm probably the oldest person in this room, and this regard for my age more than my competence. Also, I think I've been asked to speak in the context of provinces because they're not here for the most part, and some may be joining us online. And let me say only one point of introduction, and then probably I'll try to make 1 or 2 points. I know Aisha has given me 4.5 minutes. She has to go. I've benefited immensely, and I say very honestly, I've learned there are so many pieces, someone can contact, someone will agree, and someone wishes कि जी मैंने कहे होते या मुझे इनका ज़्यादा बेहतर पता होता. But I will not comment on them what should be done or what should be included or not. Please allow me to say how to think about NDC, not what should be included and what not. And a simplest analogy that comes to me, if all of you understand Urdu, I'll say that in Urdu with permission from you, and I'll translate that very quickly. Think of a table. There are round tables at the end. उसके नीचे बाज दफा सिर्फ एक टांग होती है, एक कॉलम पे खड़ी होती है, राइट? उसके ऊपर अगर कोई कोनी जोर से रख दे तो वो टेबल टिप करती है. Is that right? All of us have seen that. Now assume for a moment that column on which that table is standing, its name is Ministry of Climate Change. And then the table will trip the moment anybody puts his or her weight on that. Weight of resources, resource of allocations, of politics, or whatever we have. So that's not the most productive, that's not the most stable way to think about a national document. I just want to give you an example. We saw with great deal of pride that we constructed some hydropower. Assume those large projects had not come. We wouldn't have been able to show that. That's called tripping the table. So instead of addressing coal, if it suited somebody hydropower investment, they did that. And that is a kind of veto power, oversized power that we have. If it is Ministry of Climate Change, as the custodian of NDC, please bear with me. I want you to think differently. Now, when you I'll take the analogy, same analogy further. You have created a NDC, in my mind, is more like a table that we have created for donors. You come and you pick pieces to support us. And I'll say that instead of having one pillar, think of a table that has 4 legs, and each leg is a province. Then it's very stable. And for me to way of thinking about NDC is a table that has at least 4 legs. You can have more, but at least 4. You can have the 5th leg for GB. You can have another leg for AJK. You can have another leg for Islamabad Capital Territory. But legs will make it firm. And then it will be a table not for our development partners. We value their contribution towards Pakistan's needs. But then it will be a table that will convene the stakeholders. Imagine if that's a table of provinces. I've never been to any meeting where the 4 provinces sat together in NDC. And I've been around for quite some time, as you can see from my face. So conceive a table that has stakeholders in provinces. The NDC rests on them, and it's table that is for the provincial representation. I hope somebody is listening from the provinces, that our heart is with you on this. Also, in order to make the table sturdy and firm, oftentimes you'll see the legs are connected with each other. याद है? टेबल से लकड़ी की टांग से दूसरी टांग तक एक जाती है जो उसको हिलने से बचाती है, टेबल्स को मजबूत करती है. Let me take that analogy further. Those are your sectors. Assume that you're talking about a particular sector, agriculture, that will go all the way around. Let's say you go about industry, it will probably not reach Balochistan, it will be only 2 or 3 provinces, not include GB or something. Let's say it includes ecosystems. It will go to GB and KP if it is glaciers, and it will go to Balochistan and Sindh if it is seawater intrusion. So I can see that table can become very sturdy, and sturdiness will come out of our performance or about our vulnerabilities and so on and so forth. So if we are able to envision NDC as a table that has very stable legs because we are connected, it's owned and driven by the provinces, then the stakeholders will be different. We can be honest amongst ourselves, and if there is only somebody who can understand English, I can say it in Urdu, we don't need to be dishonest with us. A liar is a liar. Except for him, everybody in the world knows he's a liar. When I tell a lie, I'll think that I'm able to fool you. But the fact of the matter is I'm fooling myself. The fictional data, fictional progress, unreliable, unsustainable data can be the biggest ambition of this NDC. You can say that our foundation from our very first national communication was certainly scientifically not very firm. That was our first, and anybody can make mistakes. We want to fix that. We can fix the second one, 1.0, when we said that our growth rate will be 15%. Historically, Pakistan has never in 75 years achieved that kind of rate. So we can have corrective measures. And those corrective measures will show our earnest desire to be part of global community. And there's no better place to give us solid, reliable data than the provinces. It's not the issue of capacity. Oftentimes, we over-concentrate powers in the federal area as if we have greater power. I want to not go too much into it, but I just want to make one more point before I conclude. So, ambition, if the starting point of ambition is bringing science and credibility in what we say, and I've already mentioned that we need to have a good street address than the Ministry of Climate Change for the national ownership of NDC. And I've already said that it is a table for not for the donors, but for the provinces to sit together and set a direction. And therefore, if I had a way of advising the Prime Minister, which I hope I will have, there's a meeting coming up on these issues, I will say the following. Let's have a vision or NDC for 2050, or to be more exact, 2047, when Pakistan will be 100 years old. And after 5 years, bring it down to 5 years shorter and keep coming down. Use each year as a building block how to get to 2047. Like, for example, somebody mentioned air quality. I cannot have a clean air with the best of my effort even before 2047 to international standards. So what are my building blocks? So the very first year's NDC can be the very first year for our vision for 2050. And that includes the 3 points I want to share with you from a report that is accessible to all of us. And I deliberately printed and brought it here. You simply have to go to WRI website and you'll see next generation of NDC accelerating climate action. So our ambition is, it is rightly mentioned, I don't want to take time, it's not about increasing, but bringing earnest truth. And second, accelerated action, aligned with a longer term vision, how we'll go. And it mentioned 5 things, and I want to mention those 5 things in the provincial context. This report does not mention in provincial context. First is, if 90% of global economy has already committed to net zero emissions, I see us no harm in committing to net zero emissions. And if we fail, we fail. But at least we want to be part of international community. When we go and say loudly that we need international assistance and support, we need to align with global trend and global commitments. So the first is net zero emissions, starting with net zero emission provinces. And that takes me to sectoral transformations at the provincial levels. Gohir Saab, please bear with me. I am just coming back from the Philippines. Their GCISC model is coordination because they get reports from each ministry. Agriculture will send them, these are our emissions, and water will send them their emissions, and education and health and everybody. So this is the sectoral transformation that needs to happen in the provinces. They need to tell us what their sectoral emissions are, and we need to compile, consolidate international report and make it and then it's about resilience of all systems, including ecosystems. Please do not ignore biodiversity. Please do not ignore the carrying capacity. And that oftentimes gets overshadowed in the resilience game because that has not been. And then catalyzing investment has two parts. I'm very happy that Sobia mentioned National Climate Finance Strategy. If the government has approved that, it puts premium on generating domestic resources through taxes and levies and through investment of private sector, Pakistani private sector. Unless it's a nationally driven, it cannot be very reliable source of financing for us. So catalyzing domestic investment and then putting people at the center, this report says, and I think I heard from others also. So if I could say that my first year, 5 years of NDC Gohir Sahab will reduce my air emission quality by 1 percentage point, that's a good respectable one. With that, I wish to thank you very much for your patience and thank you for bearing with me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Lalit Saab, for highlighting the significance and the very important role of the provinces. We do have two provinces with us. Ahmed Iqbal Chaudhry Saab will be joining us shortly. And also we have colleagues from joining us online from KPK. But again, moving ahead with the discussion. Thank you so much again, once again, Ali Saab, wonderful intervention. So let us move towards perhaps teams and the organization. So on the agenda, we do have with us a representative from talking about, particularly initially from the mitigation side. We do have colleagues from the Renewables First RE Coalition, and then we'll be also coming to our colleagues from IFCU to speak a bit on the climate finance a bit later as well. But firstly, let me come to colleagues from Renewables First, and if I can again, if we can display the slide that we already had, and RE Coalition for their interventions and inputs in the discussion. Yeah. Ji Basit, please. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Obed. And I think started off not a very good vibe in the start of the morning because I was hearing a lot about 2 degrees and 3 degrees Celsius, and that kind of like scared me a lot. Up until recently, some of the speakers highlighted the gravity of the situation and, talking more about ambitious because I think what we have been, I mean, my personal view, I've been always looking into the impacts of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Already we have crossed that. But just since we were having discussion around 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, I kind of like just checked it up about what the impact for the 2 degree is. So just to put into context, since we're talking about Pakistan, so the frequency of heat waves that kind of goes 10 times, increase 10 times if you go from 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, along with many others. So I think the question about pragmatism, ambitious, yes, you have to be realistic, but there is no chance of being not ambitious at all if you're talking about NDCs. Because for us, we are already suffering from enough heat waves as such, we cannot bear anymore. So having started from that, I think the second thing, I think Takir Saab already mentioned and with a lot of other speakers, and I want to reiterate, having the right data to evaluate our progression is significantly important. Mustafa also mentioned about the growth rate and the dichotomy that exists between that. This NDC is for our internal alignment. It's for internal ambitious as well as putting forward for the community as well. So we have to rationalize, we have to make sure that the progress that we are showing, the reduction of emissions we are showing are actually what have been materialized as per the interventions and not just by the reduction in the growth rate. Another thing before coming to the specific areas on these NDC 3.0, I wanted to mention also because, there's something that have changed in previously in COP29 that we have seen happening in the world. And I think there's a very stark boundary that we saw build up. I mean, you were part of there as well, along with many of the people who are sitting there, between the global south and global south and global north.
and there's a very startling differences and the two sets that have emerged in set, and that is going to go further strengthen up and going up to the next COP. And I think for the global south, the driver's seat is right now empty. And for us, it's the onus is on us whether we decide to be laggard and just follow what the others are doing, or whether we try to put ourselves as a leader. And where we are at an ideal position and unfortunately an ideal position because of our vulnerability to overall climate change. So I think the whole question of ambitiousness have to trickle down on where you want to place yourself in terms of global climate diplomacy, because honestly speaking, even though your needs are adaptation, you cannot go around and build a case for adaptation funding without having sufficient work done and the strategies deployed on mitigation end. You cannot lead the climate finance platform with mining for coal mining done in your own country. So you have to align yourself strategically. So having said that, in terms of the NDC 3.0, I think there are basically 5 factors where I think there's a lot of strengthening needs to be done. Firstly, let's come to the renewable energy targets. I think that's already mentioned. I think we need to be very clear about what we actually mean by it, because we have seen that term being misused at times, if I can say, because the original idea of this 30% target came from ARE policy 2019, and that envisioned only solar and wind. And somehow the regulator decided, okay, we are not going to reach that target, so let's include hydro into the picture, and they make up that target of 30% and now the 60%. So we have to decide what we actually mean by the 60% RE target. And another thing that has happened in recent years is, you were also asking about, is the distributed generation. And I think that has completely changed the picture. To an extent, it did happen with the government policy, but to be honest, it was a completely market-based, community-led transition that has already happened. And we recently did a study on that, which shows about about 17 gigawatt of panels being imported in last fiscal years. To put it into context, that quantum kind of equals or allows us to reach the last year tripling goal pledge of the UAE. So we can essentially claim that we achieved that. But having said that, we need to decide who did that. Did we as a government, the policymakers did that, or the community did that and the market did that? So I think that needs to be translated into our new targets about the distributed generation, and the focus needs to be not just putting on the solar, because the momentum, solar wind, the momentum is already there. The market and the economics are there. The focus for the next NDC should be on the distributed generation. How do you enable and keep that momentum going? Because we have a history of killing the momentum when something happens our way. So how do we do that? And secondly, I think one thing that was missing here is also the grid part. You need to provide the right ecosystem and infrastructure to sustain this momentum, and you need to put right investments into the grid. Otherwise, this whole solar rush, solar boom, 17 gigawatt will essentially be just a bubble, unfortunately, that's going to burst. Hopefully not. Second thing, I think that's a very contentious point, and I duly noted that in our previous NDCs as well. We rightfully say that we have put up a coal moratorium. And then we, in downwards in the subtitle, we say no imported coal from now onwards. I mean, we have to define local coal is also coal. It's not something else. And it's perhaps dirtier than the imported coal. And then, we have to decide what we want to do with it. Because I see there, I mean, Arsaf showed the number. We have decreased 5 megatons, perhaps, through the imported coal reduction. Then we have increased 11 megatons through the local coal. So did that coal moratorium, paved any results at all? Because ultimately the picture is that it increased emissions in itself. So I think we have to start thinking of how to, take the discussion around the coal as a whole, not just an imported coal, because we know the economics are running on it. And the third thing that I wanted to mention is around the technology transfer. I think that's very crucial for it. We were having discussions about the madam from the ministry was also talking about just having meeting on the EVs part, and we are overly focused on the EVs within that. But the basic issue with the EVs, if you look into the trajectory of Shanghai or Beijing, who are leading in the EV scale, is about providing the enabling infrastructure, not just putting up targets, because the markets makes that. And I think we have to focus on that. And similarly, there are a couple of strategic technology transfer areas that we need to incorporate. One is the infrastructure for the EVs that has to be there, and the EVs will pave way. The second is the batteries, because ultimately we missed the bandwagon for producing the solar when we were supposed to. But for the battery, it is right now crucial to enter into this space. So I think we need to define battery as a strategic area as well that will enable this transition. Another thing that I wanted to mention is around the we have a lot of protected area. We have those targets. I think it would really help to put a quantum on the carbon sinks in terms of emissions and set a target around that. Just last point, and I'll finish up. And I think that's a resonation of I'll be resonating a lot of things that have happened, that in terms of the the conditional financing gap, we have to realize where that finance will come from, identify the exact sources where bilateral GCF, and set up the targets for them as well about how we are going to achieve that. Because I'm pretty sure we are still going to fall short of a gap that we are not able to fill through development partners or any of this green GCF or mitigation action facility. Where will we fill that gap from? And that's where our discussion needs to happen.
Yeah,
Thank you.
perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Basit. So, yeah, very quickly, do we have any quick comments on the renewable energy or EV side that someone wants to highlight again very briefly? Yes, please, Ms. Sophia.
With apologies, because I know that this was supposed to be more for the civil society, so I'm kind of jumping in here, but thank you for that. But what Basit says makes a lot of sense, obviously. And what I've always been saying is we need to look at the entire life cycle. With, for example, EVs, it's about an enabling environment, but it's also about circular economy approaches within this infrastructure. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a much bigger problem than the one that we're trying to solve right now. And China right now has a lithium recycling rate of over 90%. They don't need fresh lithium anymore, which we all know is a rare mineral and very, very limited in the quantities that it's available in. So that's the one thing. Again, Basit's comment gives me a very good segue because he mentions renewables and the fact that we have a policy disconnect. On the one hand, we have a policy that says we will increase the percentage of renewables by X% till target year. On the other hand, our electricity planning processes, power generation and planning processes do not support these targets. A missing piece in NDC 2.0 and NDC 3.0 is how do the different policies, or how will this NDC intersect with the different policies? That's a very important consideration, especially if we don't have a lot of time, then especially, or at the very minimum, looking at the 5 NDC sector-specific policies. The government is putting up a new industrial policy. Ideally, it should connect directly with the NDC 3.0. And then finally, I'd like to end with a very, very provocative thought. And that thought is that should the NDC 3.0 be replacing, or at the very minimum be an addition to the 5-year work plans that the Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiative puts out? How is it going to be anchored? Because at the end of the day, it's not just about international climate finance, but it's also about domestic climate finance. So the one and only exercise that was done on climate public expenditure and institutional review found out that 8.3% of Pakistan's domestic expenditure could be tagged as climate finance. We need to pick up this exercise again, because eventually Pakistan will be reporting against all finance inflows and outflows, and that's a key determinant of success. This is, I think it's really something to think about, because all ways should ideally go through the NDC. And then perhaps a last very provocative thought for all the learned colleagues to consider as they deliberate is that we need to stop thinking of, perhaps it's time for a paradigm shift, and not thinking of the NDC as a standalone document that we pull out of the drawer. We start in June, when the intersessionals go, and then there's hectic activity till November, which is usually when the COPs happen. But it's a plan. It's an investment plan. It's also, when Ali was talking about what was happening in 1.0, the whole idea with the NDC partnership and the partnership plan was to develop an investment plan that would finance all of what Pakistan had wished to do. So, we need to come to that type of an approach, and it would be wonderful if we saw that. But really, it's about embedding the NDC and seeing is not as the end, but rather a means to an end. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Then just a minute, perhaps. But yes, again, leading from that, I believe even on the EV side, the new energy vehicle policy is about to sort of come. And we also know to sort of see how those targets are also aligned with the previous, and if that is something that's feeding into the groups as well. So yes, Zen, you wanted to, I think very briefly, because we'll quickly going towards adaptation
I'll
side.
make it very quick. I think that last thing is supremely important because it's cross-sectoral and now it's cross-provincial as well. And now we're also thinking expanding the table beyond the NDCs. Where is the Constitution in all this? Where is the CCI in all this? Where's the question of regulatory jurisdiction? Because we know that the Constitution affords regulatory jurisdiction when it involves cross-provincial matters to the CCI. And we also know that all of the issues, which I 100% agree with what Ms. Becker suggested, point towards the need for something that goes into that interprovincial coordination mode. They're not there in our NDCs from the last 2.0 version. They're not even there here. We're not talking about them. We haven't discussed what those forums would look like and what that consultative process will look like. The last two thoughts, if these are indeed for the donors, then we have to begin asking, where do we join equity with the donors and what they've done in the past? Simple example, coal. EVs and others. Let's just take coal, for example. We know there's World Bank money involved that's been pushed in. We know there's ADB money involved. Can we think of L&D beyond them? Can we think of L&D beyond nations? Can we think of L&D with respect to these agencies and what they've done in the past? And can we put them out and be brave enough to have them in our NDCs? I think it's an important thing to follow.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Zen. Very well noted points. And yeah, moving towards the next, we have with us Ahmed Qazi Saab, we have Anam, we have Dr. Majid from Indus Consortium but I'll just request that we again have to go on a break in like 20 minutes, and we'll also sort of request Arif Saab to share his light. But so perhaps limiting our interventions a bit. So let me first come to Ahmed Qazi Saab from the EU. So if you have any interventions that you would like to sort of highlight, please.
No, thank you so much. And firstly, thank you, STPI, for inviting us, because it's been really insightful since morning. And also because under our Switch Asia program and other programs, we've been involved somewhere in the indices discussion, but having this kind of an inclusive discussion where we're getting inputs from all parts is really helpful. I think there's not a lot to say from our side as well, because a lot has been reflected upon, especially by Ali Taqir Saab, and I think he's laid out the thought process. We've talked about ambitions, we've talked about realism, but what we would also want to put on the table is we should also be talking about accountability of those as well. Who is to be accountable for those targets? Who are we going to ask whether we are doing our job right or not? Is also a question, whether the data would respond to it only, or whether we are actually going to be holding those entities responsible in this regard, who are going to be working in that. And I think we've learned in the past as well that until we're not accountable, we don't even look into implementing it or owning those ambitions. We can be as ambitious as possible, or we can be as realistic as possible. But at the end of the day, if we don't own our realism, or if we don't own our ambitions, we would be continuing this debate even beyond 2050, let alone 2047. So I think that's the part. On the EU side, we've been very much committed towards supporting these aspects. Our EU Green Deal is self-responsive in a lot of ways. Our global gateway strategy is also responsive in its 360-degree approach. And I think the Prime Minister's vision is also very clear in his 5 E's framework that he laid out in the past as well. So I think there are a lot of aspects that have been laid out, the discussions, the strategies, the direction is over there, but I think it's more about how we are going to approach those directions. And that's where the thought process has to lead to if you're going towards NDC 3.0. Again, we need to see if it's going to be the provinces, if it's going to be the local entities, if it's going to be the communities, or if it's going to be the federal government. How is this channel going to connect? Where is going to be the bondage? And I mean, and that would also make our part of cooperation even easy. GIZ is sitting on the table as well. Even on their part, the cooperation part would become more easy as well, for the fact that that's where, because we have our own strategies that come in, that's where we'll be able to better link to who we actually have to work with in order to make things work. We've talked about capacities. There's immense capacity, which Ali Taqir Saab was also referring to, but we have to really bring them on board on these things and make them aware of what we are talking about. We can have an NDC 3.0, but who would be knowing about it? Would only the policymakers be knowing about it, or would the real players at the ground be knowing about it? So I think that's where, I mean, these are certain aspects that we would lay out on the table as well. And our support is continued, and that is reflective of our programs that we're actually doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Qazi Saab, for offering support and highlighting the need for these inclusive developments is really, really important. Before coming to Anam, Dr. Majid, you also sort of represent a consortium of civil society. If you have any interventions to add, please go ahead.
Thank you, Beth. I am, because I represent grassroots level organizations, I'll just try to give 3 or 4 suggestions that could be incorporated in this NDC if possible, or moving forward in the next one, which hopefully will be in a better condition than we are right now. Firstly, as has already been pointed out, apparently we are working in silos. That still appears to be the case with the preparation of this NDC. One suggestion would be to get input from the various sectors and then compile it to create an NDC, not the other way around, because right now it appears we create the NDC and then we assign it to different players or different sectors. So we need to work the other way around. One thing I would really commend what you guys have done, working on sub-sectoral targets, particularly the provincial specific targets. That is a discussion I've heard. So that is something I would like to commend, but I would like to build on it. And rather than just stopping at province specific targets, we need to take it a step further and make it maybe community specific targets, because within a single province in Pakistan, we've got different communities facing different climate-based problems, whether it be drought, whether it be floods, whether it be sea intrusion. And along with this, one suggestion would be maybe have a government department-specific target set. For example, the energy department needs to achieve X, Y, Z in a certain time frame. So that might be an interesting take on it. One thing I think I did not really see too much of in the quick look at this document was a discussion on the river Indus. Indus itself is the lifeline of not just a single community, but the whole of Pakistan. It needs to be given its rights, and these rights need to be included within the NDCs. For this, maybe you've already included, I did not get a chance to look at it. Agriculture and the use of water needs to be addressed. This is something that Zain alluded to as well. When Pakistan is a water-stressed country, quickly becoming a water-starved country, and we are thinking of developing a new canal system for specific projects. So that is something we need to take care of, because this will lead to the destruction of our protected mangrove forests. This is already creating problems for communities upstream and downstream. So this is something we need to consider. And lastly, I would like to discuss about, yes, we need to acknowledge the need for a just energy transition. We need to speed it up, but there needs to be clarity. I think that is something that Bas has also alluded to. That we need to be clear on what we mean when we say RE at 60%, for example. Let's just commit to VRE and fix a share of VRE to 30% or 40%, whether that be solar or wind. And we should not allow these projects to intrude onto the rights of communities, because we've seen in the past protected land and lands reserved for grazing being taken up by force for the setting up of solar power plants, for example. So that is something maybe we need to protect the rights of the community. And lastly, I would like to add, this is something I think most of us have already agreed to, that yes, the need for a robust NDC is the need of the hour. But if we cannot monitor it, an NDC will never be robust. So one way to monitor it is maybe we could have a yearly breakdown of the NDCs and a yearly document or information dissemination. Okay, these were the targets and this is what we've achieved so far. So these were just
yes. Thank you.
A few thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mazid, for again, a strong M&D, really important as well. But I think taking lead from this to coming to Anam from the German Red Cross. Yeah, Anam, especially talking about the adaptation side of the things, if you can highlight a brief few interventions as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will be brief, keeping in mind the time constraint. I think most points have anyway been covered. Rather than speak about about adaptation, I think I'm just going to make a point about mitigation. I've been recently doing some research on the link between emissions and economic growth. And we have to be prepared that Pakistan's emissions are going to rise, and they are rising. So it's a welcome thought to hear that the NDC 3.0 is going to be focusing on mitigation as well. The narrative for Pakistan to date has been that we've been focused very much on adaptation, which is a good thing and which is the need of the hour for communities. But, one of our mantras as a country is that Pakistan emits less than 1%. So what? So does Italy, so does Indonesia, so does Thailand, so do some countries in the European Union. What we really need to be expecting at the moment is that that's not really important. That's not a justification for us to only focus on adaptation. We have to expect that our emissions are going to rise. They have risen by something like 25% in the last decade or so, based on whatever data you look at. And I would like everyone to maybe go online and have a look at the emissions per country globally. And you'll be surprised to see how many of them emit less than 1% of the world's total, right? So that's not really our thing. So the challenge for us at the moment is how do we couple mitigation and adaptation and make sure that the emissions reductions and the benefits actually translate to communities. You will also find that high levels of GDP are usually coupled with high levels of emissions up to a certain point. After a certain point, when countries reach a certain amount of GDP, the emissions start to fall as well. So until we reach that point, which takes a while, it's necessary for us to plan for the rising emissions and focus on that, I believe. The second one is that one of the things, I might have missed this because I was a bit late to this, we really have to focus on scope 2 and scope 3 and above emissions from electric vehicles, solar panels, and from the renewable energy transition. And even above that, because we are setting these targets, but can we actually, we should also be accounting for the scope 2 and scope 3 emissions from these, as well as something SDPI has been working a lot on, which is the CBAM and other such mechanisms where we can make sure that we are actually realistically accounting for the emissions that we're undertaking. And then finally, one thing from a community perspective is that we really need to talk about the large-scale conversion of agricultural and other lands to industrial and residential and other use. That is something that is extremely concerning for what we like to call ourselves. We like to group NGOs and things into civil society organizations. We're all civil society at this table. everyone who's a citizen of this country and who wants a citizen of the world really, and who wants to handle the climate problem, we can't just group people into different interests. The interest is that we should be addressing climate change through every aspect. And at the moment, the legal and the other backing for the conversion of these lands into very high emitting sectors is a very big concern for the country. And we should be including these things in our NDC as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, Anu. So coming to Dr. Maj from, Dr. Naveed from UET Peshawar. So, sir, over to you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I think I agree with most of the points raised here, especially with Ali Tawqir Saab, to kind of break down this NDC 3.0 into bricks. And I would say that especially year-wise, those bricks should be given to universities as well. I mean, to find the local solutions for reducing the carbon emissions. That's really important, to find the indigenous local solutions embedded in our social culture. I would especially point out, because we are working on a project, the transformation of building sector in Pakistan, a pathway towards clean, green, and sustainable building, that is funded by BMZ and supported by GIZ Pakistan. In that project, we have developed some, kind of intricate roadmaps for Pakistan, for net zero scenario that Ali Tawqir Saab was talking about. For us, going hand in hand with the rest of the world, that net zero target must be there, let's say by 2050, if not 2050, then by 2070, but there must be a target. Another thing that I really want to emphasize here is that I saw the building as subservient to the other sectors, like the energy efficiency sector. I want to see the building sector as a separate individual sector. That is how it is practiced internationally. I mean, the building sector is one of the most important NDC sector for the rest of the world. This is what should we do, and we should have this roadmap for buildings that they should have a net zero target by 2050, or let's say 30% reduction by 2030, or whatever is the international target. So, I would be really happy. We have submitted few roadmaps for let's say for Islamabad, for the net zero Islamabad roadmap. We have submitted it to the CDA, but we would love to kind of work on it, and it should become after some time, after some deliberation, part of the NDC 3.0. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Naveed. We have, please go ahead, sir. Thank you. I was about to open the floor. Yeah.
No, actually, I am the last one, Dr. Hamid Jamali. So that's why maybe you forgot me. I'll just add a couple of points, actually. I'll start with some of the things that Ali Tawqir Saab said. I'm from Balochistan, so you didn't invite me because I was from Balochistan, but because I had a climate change background. So I'm not representing my province here. But just to start, I am leading a climate change and health vulnerability and adaptation plan for KP. So that's why I say it, because the Department of Health or the health sector is devolved to provinces. So when you make a plan at the provincial level, we have seen National Adaptation Plan and how it was made, and there were lots of haste in doing it, and how consultations were done, and how provinces are represented by this National Adaptation Plan. So this when you make a plan at the provincial level, so this is a document that will be owned, signed, celebrated, launched by the Department of Health. So when we make the plan at the national level, which will be like Health National Adaptation Plan, it will definitely contribute to it. So I think in the climate change scenario, in the climate change scene, I did my PhD and I looked at the 2012 policy. I just want to share one thing. I looked at how much the word international was mentioned and how much was the national was mentioned. You won't believe in 2012 policy, the word international was mentioned 10 times more than the national. So I think that's, of course, we have obligations internationally, but our policies have been outward looking. So that is one of the things I have seen. It's more about commitments, fulfilling the commitments, getting the international climate finance, how to bring the partners in. And Ali Tawqir Saab rightly mentioned, I wanted to bring that point as well, that the document stands on these legs. So I think on the climate scene, it has been a different, it has been other way around. Until and unless you don't start with the provinces, I don't see any provinces here, frankly speaking. That's a very sad story, to begin with. So it should have been the provinces. And one thing to add it, I think Palitoki Shiksa mentioned that he's my teacher as well and a guru. Uh, for example, if you want to do something that is intersectoral, interdepartmental, I think the starting point is not correct here. Something that has to be interdepartmental and intersectoral, it has to be done somewhere where the power lies, where the money lies. Frankly speaking, let's be honest, where the money and power lies, it's planning and development departments and the finance departments. This time I was involved in the making of the Balochistan climate policy. I was drafting that, part of the drafting team actually. So what we started with the planning and development department, not with the Ministry of Environment, because nobody listens to them. Nobody listens to the environment department in here or somewhere else. So I think something, apologies, Gohit Saab, I'm sorry I'm saying this, but I think it's a reality. That's something that is intersectoral, interdepartmental. It should start where the power lies. And it should be done within the sectoral policies. The water policy, the water department or the irrigation department only looks on its own policies. So if you put climate change into the water policy, it will be implemented. It won't be implemented if you make a provincial policy. So we lack coordination. So let's be honest, the accountability is vertical. So you need to put where at the heart of the planning. Recently, I was part of the process of revising these. Ali Tokishes was also part of that. The planning guideline for whole of the planning department, PC1, PC2s, PC3s. So now the climate change is there. It was not there until now. It has been there now for a couple of months. So at least there's a beginning there. And until and unless you don't put climate change at the heart of the planning and finance, I think it won't work. And the last thing that it should start from the provinces should do at the sectoral level, departmental level, it should come up and feed into the national level, not the other way around. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. No, extremely important points, Dr. Saab. Yes, we will have two provincial representatives, but again, definitely in the next section, and anyone who wasn't able to sort of share his light or submit his findings, we do have the group working activity post lunch. So I will also be taking a lot of inputs from there and presenting it over there. We do have two MPs coming. MPs coming after this session, after the lunch break as well. So let's also sort of try to further build on the developments. And again, really important points on bringing the planning departments over here. Yeah, we're extremely well noted. So as for now, again, since we're sort of so let us come to Arif Saab for some of his final reflections, if he wants to sort of respond to any of the points in 3 to 4 minutes, and then we'll move towards the break. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't want to be a hurdle between the lunch and you. I will be very much quick in my reflections on what has been said. There is discussion on ambition, discussion on implementation, discussion on honest way of reflecting things in the documents. All are acceptable. But my question is, we should be ambitious in terms of activities, or we should be ambitious in terms of including all the things in that. This is a challenge to me, because when I left my presentation, I posed a question to all the audience: do guide us what this document should look like. Very good reflections. The provinces are the pivotal point for all these NDCs. Instead of going from federal, this time we are starting from the provinces to federal. The provincial NDCs sort of commitments will make part of the federal NDCs. And it is not a process of couple of months. We started the process of capacity building of the provinces. Sheikh Saab said there is capacities, but I must say since last 2 years, we are doing the capacity building trainings of the greenhouse gas inventories in the provinces. We have trained more than 300 people in the provinces and still we commit through GCISE that we will be their counterpart in developing their sectoral and subsectoral baselines for that. GCISE commits that. There is discussion about means of, you can say, implementation, about legal perspectives. I really honor Maulvi Saab's comments on these things. This is a new dimension that we need to include in these things. But my humble submission will be that NDC is not a document wherein all of our aspirations can be, you can say, वो कूजे में बंद करने वाली बात है, तो वो नहीं हो सकता. We must be ambitious. मैं हमीद जमाली साहब की जो intervention, I do honor it. There are number of policies in Pakistan. शेख साहब यूज्ड टू से ये पॉलिसियों का कब्रिस्तान है. But I say that despite having number of climate change policies, mainstreaming of climate change considerations into the sectoral policies is not there. But we should be aligning our NDCs with the policies on climate change, whether it is federal and provincial. But the mainstreaming of climate change consideration is in sectoral policies is something that is beyond the scope of this NDC. This is a long term working. Just last reflection. So we have mentioned about CPIER exercise. There are two interventions that are currently going on. One is by the green budgeting by ministry, green tagging of budget by the Ministry of Finance. That is a good thing. Secondly, State Bank of Pakistan is working on the green taxonomy project. So these are the two good interventions that are presently going on, and we should be part of all these things. We should be clear and transparent where the financial, technology, and capacity flows are. We should be diverting these resources to those places where they actually should be. We should not be grappling it in our own hands, but they should be at the climate change hotspots, the vulnerable communities, and wherever they are needed. So with this, I wish you a good lunch break, and we will be back for the group work session again.
Thank you. Thank you. Zainab, yeah, please.
Just before we go for lunch, right after lunch, just to set the tone, we have group working activity, and there are going to be four groups, I believe. Five groups: adaptation, mitigation, resilience, climate communications, and inclusivity.
And climate finance.
And yes, and climate finance and inclusivity. So SDPI team members will be facilitating the group work. What we are expecting from all of you is to come up with strategies on, how do you see the NDC 3.0 document so that we can support GCISC. And as Arif Saab mentioned, that we are looking for the answers on, what should become part of NDC strategy document. So after lunch, hope to see you all here. Thank you so much.
Lunch is served. Lunch is served at the back, please. Okay.